If they're willing to try everything, they would have got sober. Because that's insane to take another human being through your ups and downs. You're on the crazy train with your urges and you want to take her along for the ride. What happens so often is people think our family, our closest ones to us, they should be our support system. You don't know what's best for me because you have your own vested interest. You're going to have to tell your wife.
Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side.
Ellie, what's up, man?
What's going on, Ryan?
Nothing much. Looking good.
Here we go. Same to you.
Living the dream.
You had said something in a previous episode, which I had promised to get back to. You spoke about family as a, support system.
Right.
And, I think we've done a number of episodes on advice. I say advice or,
You always do that.
I don't like the word advice. Right. It's more the reminders we've got that now we remember that we're sharing with others.
Right.
Those things that we've learned through our experiences, a lot of it through the experience of suffering or pain. And we remembered something that was important to us. It resonated with us. And then we say, hey.
So you never give advice?
This is something we're
you just share your lessons, your experience.
Right, in terms of what to do, sometimes, yeah. So do you think I should do this or that? But only if the person is telling me what they want to do. Right? So, for example, I'm never going to give advice to someone to stop watching porn.
Mm.
But if someone calls me and they say they want to stop watching porn, and these are the choices in front of me, so, this is a conversation I had just a couple of days ago where a guy I spoke to was heavily addicted to pornography and to escorts and other various sexual addictions. And he said he wanted to stop. And I'll often ask questions like, why do you want to stop? What's wrong with it?
Mm.
And he'll give me the reasons why. It's, in his case, it was taking up more and more time in his life, was consuming him, afterwards he didn't feel good about it and everything else. Okay, so you have a good reason to stop. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to do to get sober? Everything, mostly everything, depends what I say. Do you want to hear first? It said that the Jews before receiving the Torah, so the story, the way it's told within the Jewish culture is that God went to every nation of the world and said, do you want the Torah? And so I said, well, what does it say in it? Well, it says you can only have, sexual relations of this kind. The Torah has many. No, not for me. It says you can only eat this kinds of food and under these conditions. No, not for me. Mm. It says you have to celebrate these holidays and fast those days and pray this much. And no, not for me. And when he went to this people who eventually accepted it, it's God talking? Yes, we do. Tell us what's in it.
Gotcha.
Right. Not what's in it, then I'll tell you if I want it.
Right.
Yes, tell us what's in it. So it's kind of the same thing is, you're not calling a random person and asking them, how do I get ABC done? You're going to a heart doctor and saying, I have a heart condition, and you've read reviews or spoken to people whose heart conditions he's helped heal, and you're saying, what should I do for this heart condition? Mm-hmm. You say, well, do you want to hear from me? Do you want me to ask you before or after whether you're going to do it, or do you just want to say whatever I tell you, you're going to follow?
Right.
And the doctor may upend this person's diet or lifestyle, for example. Is it conditional, or are you ready to accept everything? Whatever I might say, whatever the doctor might say. In my case, this person is calling me for my experience on no longer struggling day to day with porn addiction, dependency on porn. So are you willing to take everything, or do I got certain rules that...
Right.
And this guy tells me no meetings. So I said, okay, let's stop there. That's my advice to you.
To go to a meeting.
Go to a meeting. So I didn't tell him what to do.
Right.
I didn't tell him he stopped watching porn, but he told me that he can't stop watching porn, and the one thing he absolutely doesn't want to do is watch porn. 1 + 1 = 2. You want to do something, you're not willing to do that.
I'm tempted to ask you, what's the best advice you ever got in your life? But that's probably a big question. I'll ask you this: or what's the best piece of advice you've gotten recently, or your most recent great piece that you've gotten? And did it come from a family member or a support system? Where did it come from?
Oh, we didn't even get to
Right. Bring it back to tie it back into what we're talking about. Or that's the question. What's the best piece of advice you've gotten from a family member? Maybe that's a good question.
The best, as I stand right now, the most recent piece of advice that impacted me strongly has to do with our relation to other people's suffering. And when we see someone else suffering and we attach to it, either through desire for something different, judgment of someone's choices, opinions on how this is going on, any of those things, we increase the suffering for that person and by extension for everyone else. And we can do a separate podcast.
Right.
We can do a separate discussion on that. But the idea basically is that we're presented with suffering, and by remaining neutral to it, we remain neutral to it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't add. It certainly doesn't add to it,
Right.
and it could potentially decrease it. But I don't say it with the intention of decreasing it, because if you're neutral to it with the intention of decreasing it, then you're not really neutral to it. But it has the potential to decrease it. And by not being neutral to it, we could potentially add to it. And I know this has to be teased out.
Right.
Right. Elie Wiesel's quote, neutrality helps the victim, not the oppressor. And we're seeing suffering. Am I neutral to the suffering? Right. We have to tease that out in a separate episode. But that was something very important I learned about other people suffering, our relation to it, and how certain opinions, judgments, desires can increase the suffering versus the opposite of it. So we can have a separate discussion on that. What I wanted to bring this back to, we got off on a tangent on advice, was something I find myself talking about is people's relation to their family members within the support system of that they're getting healthy. So their close family members, what role they play in them getting healthy. And
Siblings,
let me give you
parents.
an example. Let me give you an example for that. So 2 examples. One, a gentleman called me with a really extreme porn addiction. You know, as these are measured. If it's measured in frequency, a very extreme porn addiction. And the one thing he didn't want to do, absolutely under any circumstances, was tell his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I poked and prodded on why he really didn't want to tell his wife. It was very clear to me immediately why he didn't want to tell his wife. Do you know why? Tell his wife?
Was it shame?
No.
What was it?
Who's the first person who's going to stop him from using? His wife.
The wife.
Right. The guy was, in some sense, shameless. Not completely, meaning there is shame as a fuel for addiction, but the intensity of the behavior had a shameless quality to it. So it didn't feel,
Yeah.
I didn't feel the shame in it. You know, when someone's distracting that much from their life, I'm locked in a room for hours. You think I'm sick. It's not shame that's making me not tell you what's really going on. It's me wanting to continue to engage with the addiction, with the pornography. But
I'm curious
I'm not
to
making
know-
cardinal rules. It's just what.
Yeah, I'm
that was
curious. Does this person know and realize and is aware that he doesn't want to tell his wife because she's the one person that's gonna push him to stop, or
So I
is it
made
dressed
that-
up as something else?
It was dressed up as
For
something else.
okay.
Oh, reasons. I don't want
Interesting,
to
right.
hurt her. So you poke a little bit. I don't want to hurt her. So I said, okay, so your reason, what's the one thing you don't really want to do? It's a very obvious question to ask because sometimes you have to pull a little bit in order to find what really that one thing is and what it represents. It's not just ask this question and go from there. But if we sit with that, by the time someone is calling me, the problem has gotten to a point that they're willing to jump through 2 or 3 hoops to get to me. Right? I'm not that accessible. I'm not a therapist with an 800 number that you call and book an appointment. We discussed earlier about the filters. So there's certain filters someone has to get through. So someone has tried different things and they failed. If they're willing to try everything, they would have got sober. So what is it that they're not trying? And I know that because of the hope they still have to be sober. That's why they're still trying. But they've put a block on this thing I'm not going to do. And we all do that. I had that with rehab. And I had to become willing to go to rehab in order to get sober, but I didn't have to go to rehab. But I had to become willing to.
The willingness was there.
Where I wasn't at first. I said, no, this is not something I can do. And eventually the addiction was kicking my ass so much that I said to myself, okay, if by this and this time I have not demonstrated a good period, whatever, a definitive period of sobriety, I forget what it was, right? If within 3 months, if 3 months from now, I'm not sober for at least 30 days, then at that point in time, I'm making arrangements to check into rehab. So it's on the table. It's not something I'm running to do. It's something I'm eager to do. It's very inconvenient, but it's not off the table. And now everything frees up. Once that was the thing when it wasn't the thing I was willing to do, it was absolutely no way. I'm not going to rehab under any circumstances. Come on, man. Why not? But you want to get sober? Yes, but not that much. So everything's kind of got to be on the table. So I want to find out what's off the table for this person. In this case, he tells me it's his wife, and I say, why? And he says, because my wife, because I don't want to hurt her. I said, hold on. I thought you told me that you spend hours in your room or bathroom or, other places, which means you have several children, which means that your wife is alone with your kids. So this is motivated. Your actions are motivated by not wanting to hurt her, but you are. As well, I guess it's not that, right? And you keep pushing and pushing and pushing and, and eventually showing the holes in someone's own logic, right? Just being a mirror for them to see how that's not it. And then I can ask him the question, do you know what I think it is? It's that. You know that when you tell her, you're going to have to stop. Maybe. I couldn't have said that right off the outset, in the outset necessarily, even though I thought it. Kind of have to, wait for a few minutes for the other stuff to fall away before that particular mirror is held up at that particular angle. And so what I said is, I don't know when, I don't know how. That's not my job. Hopefully you have a therapist, you can find one, and it depends on your wife and many other factors. I'm not saying run now to tell your wife. I'm not saying how much to tell your wife or not tell. I'm not getting into any of that. I'm just saying that you're going to have to tell your wife. In my opinion, you're calling me for my advice. So my thoughts, my perspective, my experiences, you're going to have to tell your wife if you want to get sober. And he calls me up a little bit later. Things are doing great. Everything's amazing. I just wanted to let you know, thank you so much. I told my wife, she was so supportive. Since that time, I haven't watched. You haven't had to watch it all? No, nothing. Wow. Pretty incredible.
Right.
Are you going to meetings, therapy, everything else? He says, no, when I have a problem, when I have an urge, I tell my wife about it. I mean, you tell your wife every single urge you have? Yeah. Well, do you know what that's putting her through? Every single time you have an urge, you tell her about it, and then that becomes her responsibility. And he's like, well, it's working for now. I said, can you ask her how she feels about it? Because that's insane to take another human being through your ups and downs. You're on the crazy train with your urges, and you want to take her along for the ride. You take me along for the ride, meaning I don't get hurt every time he has but how can you take this other person along for the ride? And I mean, we're going at this point a little bit lengthy, but what happens so often is people think our family, our closest ones to us, they should be our support system. And we get to that place where it's like, okay, you're my family, you love me, let me be my support system. A second example of this was, someone with a pretty serious alcohol addiction who reached out to me for help. Actually, his family member reached out to me first, and then through that, I got to him, and I'm talking to him, and he's telling me, I said, what do you think? What have you done that was helpful to you in the past? And he tells me, some specific therapies that he had worked with, and I said, and why are you not going there now? I'll be specific. He had worked with psychedelic therapies one time, and he found it very helpful to him. And he was sober for a period of time, but a lot of his family had opinions about it. And he didn't want to lose his family as what he called his support system. So I said, okay, so you're telling me you want to be sober. That's why we're on the phone. You're telling me that psychedelic therapy has been helpful to you, right? Although we can't solve 35 years of problems with one treatment, that doesn't make any sense. But you're not willing to go there, even though it's helpful, because you have a family member who's part of your support system who has a strong opinion about psychedelic therapy, who's also never tried it. So I said, so we see the problem here. The problem when we make family our support system, it sounds good. Your wife is the closest person to you, so she should know your problem, but she's not your support system. This family member could be a resource for you in terms of helping you as you get sober. Maybe he's willing to pay certain money for it.
Right.
Great. But he's not your support system. There's two parts to the family member dynamic. One is that you want people whose only role in your life or primary role in your life is that they're your support system. Those are the people who should be your who should be your support system. Meaning, if someone is a world-class therapist, the best in the world, his son is not going to him for therapy because he's not an effective support system for him. He can be the best therapist in the world, but that relationship is primarily dominated by the fact that he's his father, not his support. Our support system is there with the primary or even only relationship of being our support system. If you have a business partner, if my business partner is going through a struggle with, I can be a resource, sure. How can I help? Who can I put you in touch with? I am not your support system. Not every single time you go through an issue should I be the one to call for you to call, because I have my personal opinions.
Right.
That's one. The second is that specifically family has so many of our blind spots. So we're going literally the blind leading the blind because we're infected with the same disease. We're part of the same family.
Right.
So not only does family care about their own things, and then that's the primary relationship, but that can happen like with a business partner, for example. A business partner won't be infected with the same disease, but the primary relationship is not your support system. So they're not a good support system. But family member is not good for two reasons. A, it's not their primary relationship with you, and B, they're infected. They're most likely infected with the same disease you have. So you had brought up this topic in a previous episode, and my question for you is this, because I share this point. You hear when I start talking on it, I share it forcefully because
Right.
I believe it strongly. I'm passionate about it. I've seen how many people trip up on it. I've seen, how you'll say, I'm your parents. I know best. What I know what's best for you. No, you don't know what's best for me because you have your own vested interest in my story. Right. This isn't only about me when you're giving an opinion. You love me, you care about me, but you're all mixed up in what I do. And you can't not be. And that's why you can be a valuable resource, but not my support system. So what I'm saying, and like I said, you see this is a passionate point for me. Mm-hmm. Is this new? Does this land for you? Do you disagree with it? Where are you with
what comes to mind is like just the conviction that you have there, and what comes to mind is like absolutes and my belief that they don't exist, right? So my question back to you is like, is it 100% never the case that family can be a good support system? Like, is that an absolute?
Can you envision a situation where, and I
Here's
made a
what I
distinction.
think about. I think the nuances, right? So meaning like personality plays some sort of role, meaning like a person's personality could, their family, but their personality could be a driving force in that relationship, not just kinship or not just the vested.
Well, what did you understand when I used the word support system?
What I understood from that was when you're struggling, someone that you go to, like the family is sort of like that baked in, obvious, this is who I should turn to, that feeling, that
As
innate
a resource.
feeling. As a resource.
As a resource, not as your
What's the
support
difference?
system. A resource is who is most. A resource is for a family can be a great resource. Why? Because oftentimes, for two reasons. Number one, they love you and care about you, and they're willing to go the extra mile for you.
Right.
Number two is they're infected with the same disease, so maybe they've overcome part of the challenge that you have, so they understand it. So they may be able to point you in the right direction. They may be willing to put themselves on the line in some way, financially or otherwise, in order to assist in that process. But we're not each other's support system. By support system, I mean when I say, okay, these are the people I lean on in order to get healthy and sober. I got a therapist, I got a sponsor, I got fellowships, I got fellows in recovery, I got a men's group, a women's group. Well, none of those people should be family.
Because of that vested interest. It skews the...
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't be in the same men's group as a family. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that who you're leaning on for your support specifically, not as a resource to assist you in that process, is who am I going to for advice, guidance, direction, so that I'm clear. Who's my sponsor? Who's my therapist? Who are my fellows who speak truth to me, who I can absolutely rely on? That is not family. But family could play a very important role. Like I said, we can be infected with the same disease, and one of them may have worked certain things out. So as a resource, they can be very, very powerful. But
yeah,
meaning, I
see that.
Right.
Maybe I'm
using the wrong language.
Like it's a singular role with a support system versus multiple roles with a family.
So like these specific examples.
Right.
I'm not looking for my sibling to tell me his opinion of psychedelic therapy if I know that's healthy.
Right.
Because he's not the person to direct it for me. He has his own stuff inside.
Right.
Inside that.
Right.
So I'm going to look for someone who's neutral, hopefully about that topic and hopefully about me in general, that can look at the situation honestly and say, hey, maybe it is helpful to you.
Right.
Right. And if it is, then I can support it. And if it's not, then I'll be honest with you. Family can get all caught up in this in both ways. They can think it's amazingly helpful and you must do it. They can think it's not helpful at all and you shouldn't do it.
Right. I think of a bread knife as an example.
Go ahead.
Like a bread knife has a singular role to cut bread. Can you cut something else with it? Yeah. But its main role, when it's best used, when it's best leveraged, what it's designed for, what it's created for, it's this one role.
Right.
I get that, yeah.
And our course,
and innately family can't be that because they're
right. Innately
family
can't be that. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this is that we get so confused by it. We say, "Oh,
it's a flashing light. It's home. It's
How many husbands and wives say, "Okay, I'm going to make sure you don't watch pornography." The wives will tell their husband, "I'm going to be the one to."
Right.
No, my wife doesn't want to know if I do or if I do or don't. That's our deal is like this, and I'm not saying this is a perfect deal for everyone, but this is our deal. She wants to see a commitment from me, right? And this is less prevalent today because it's not, I'm not struggling like I once was. But when we discussed it, she wanted to see a consistency from me in terms of a commitment to wellness. Mental health, whether that meant meetings or therapy or coaching or whatever else it was. If she saw that, then okay, there's someone you're accountable to. So I want to see that. If she doesn't, then she gets to chime in. we agreed to that. Hey, I haven't seen you go to a meeting in a couple of weeks. At this stage in my life, I don't go to meetings nearly as often as I once did, and it's not a comment, but just as a framework for it. And the other thing is, if she feels off in our relationship, then she wants to know, and she brings it up. If it happens to be connected to a relapse or anything related to it, then she wants me to be honest about it. Other relationships have something else. Hey, if you relapse, I want to know about it. But don't where we cross the line, and where I see somebody across the line, is the wife standing on top of the man about going to meetings, about his schedule. Did you talk to your sponsor? What did you talk to your sponsor about? You know, how's it going with him? Wanting to talk to the sponsor sometimes. If you want to talk to, I've had wives want to talk to me on sponsoring someone. It's like, so who's the sponsor?
Right.
Like, you're trying to control this ship. Let it go. Find your own sponsor.
Right.
Right. Because you got your own stuff to do. So family mixes itself up in that way.
Yeah, that makes me think of a guy that I knew, and he grew up like anti-therapy. Maybe anti is not even the word. He just was never on his radar. Like, this thing isn't real. Like, I'm never going to therapy. He goes through his struggles, and then like therapy is sort of like the last option. So he decides to try it. His wife is like, I'm going to come with you. And he, put like, let me go. Cause at that point he's like, all right, I got some stuff to work on. Like, let me try the therapy route. The wife insisted, and it completely ruined his experience and his outlook and willingness to commit to therapy. Right. Because in that moment, while he's going through his stuff, she's like, what are you, whoa, hold on. Wait a second. And so now he can't be honest. He can't be open. He can't really get to the place where he wants to get. And it completely ruined therapy for him. Right. So
another example of exactly what we're talking about is, imagine a therapist said, for you and your wife, your therapist can do one of three things. A therapist, one of three things. It can be your therapist, your wife's therapist, or a couple's therapist. Meaning, I'm only here to work on the relationship with you guys. Right. That's my role, and I'm always going to bring back to relationship. The only thing I'm going to ask you is your goal. You want to stay together, or, and we'll work to, which means that pretty much all the conversations will be together. It doesn't have to be exclusively that. He can sometimes make a decision that I'm having a separate conversation, but it's always for the benefit of the relationship. Or he can be your therapist, or he can be your therapist. Say, I'm going to be your therapist and your wife's therapist. How's that going to work?
Right.
Who are you going to have allegiance to when something comes up? If I tell you a secret and it hurts her, this whole dynamic gets super confusing.
Right.
You can't really, and how much more so with family, that it's not the therapist who's conflicted between two different people. It's the therapist who's conflicted with himself and and the person. But we so often make the mistake of thinking, oh no, our family knows what's best. No, they don't. Everything that's bad about you probably got in your family of origin.
There it is.
There it is.